13th of January 2024, Impact Wrestling rebranded as TNA Wrestling for the first time in 7 years. This sense of nostalgia has caused two comedians to go back to where it all began, back to the Nashville Fairgrounds, back to the Asylum to see where it all kicked off. Join them now as they spend the next 114 episodes escaping the Asylum. Hey, I'm LJ and welcome to the prelude to Escaping the Asylum. I'm a comedian, YouTuber, podcast host, quizmaster, visionary, dreamweaver, also bus driver. If you've got that reference, we should probably be friends. I am here to host you with this brand new podcast, Escaping the Asylum, where we watch through all the original NWA TNA weekly pay-per-views. And, well, this is too big a task for just one man. So I cannot do this alone. So I was going to say stole, but it's more a case of borrowed on the lie that I returned him in the condition to which I found him from Pro Wrestling Nation. It's Mr. Funky Sam Medina. How are we doing,
Hey, what is up? I was going to say the word would be acquired.
That could have worked in that introduction. But
how you doing, man?
We have 114 of these to do, so, you know, we can keep changing this up.
Hell yeah.
So you looking forward to the journey you're about to set out on?
You know, I'm excited about it. I feel like TNA Wrestling, NWA TNA to be precise, was a really fun journey when I was young and not really looking at it in the perspective of hindsight. And I feel like it's going to be even more fun this time.
When it comes to like the NWA TNA stuff, where did you sort of first kind of pick up with it?
So I started pretty early on, not at the very beginning, but pretty early on. I remember the first few things I can remember is seeing AJ Styles defending the X Division title against a young upstart of Chris Sabin, and also AJ Styles and Frankie Kazarian. Those are two matches that caught my attention quick. So I was an AJ Styles fan leaving WCW, and so that's kind of why I followed him over to TNA personally.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I wouldn't, well, not a tape trader, but I would always try and track stuff down on the internet, and I was aware there was a promotion working at Universal Studios, and for some reason I don't know where I got the TNA name from. That's what I was searching for, and I came across the X Division title match, which we're going to be covering in a couple of episodes' time, the four-way round robin elimination. And so that's where I started my TNA journey from. So I was quite near the start. This would have been only a month or two after that happened. So yeah, so we're both both go quite far back, even if we're not right at the start.
Yeah, it's funny. I just want to interrupt you for a second. You mentioned tape trading. I was never a tape trader, but for a period of time, my best friend and I would buy videotapes off of a videotape company that we probably shouldn't mention on the air because they don't have a good association now. But we would buy like ECW fan cam tapes and stuff, and those were really fun.
I think I know what you're referring to, and that I believe is coming up. We're going to go into that, I believe, because that does sour a relationship, and a certain Mr. CM Punk has actually brought up that relationship in past shoots, which I think I'm probably going to quote verbatim in some of those interviews when we get onto that subject. But that is that's a good few months down the line. I can't, without the timeline in front of me, I can't tell. But so today, we're not doing any of the pay-per-views today. We're doing the build-up to the first TNA pay-per-view. There is a lot to go through, so this may actually be slightly longer than the next few episodes, but hopefully it'll be of interest to anyone who's sort of listening. You can, of course, if you're listening to this, get in contact with us. We are etapod@proton.me. That's our email address. Or you could track us down on the social medias, ETA Pod on everything except Facebook, where we ETA TNA Pod 1, because we're the best at doing this. We're the only ones doing this at the minute. So
right out the gate, we're the best. I love it.
I say that. I think I do actually know another guy who does a similar sort of podcast, and he's a few years in. So, but I'm not going to plug him because
Yeah, I know of another one, one or two as well. I mean, yeah, we won't plug them. We're better than them because they can find us. They can't find them.
Well, I guess the best date to start with is well,
The
between the
contract says
24th and
McMahon, but it doesn't say Vince McMahon.
exactly, yeah. So, 26th of March, 2001. We, you know what this is about. But for those who aren't aware of what happened on this date, this is the date it was announced to the public that the WWF at the time had purchased WCW. It happened over the sort of weekend. There was still paperwork to be sort of worked out, but essentially, Vince bought his competition. What are your memories of this?
So the best thing I remember about this is the internet was very new. It was very not new, but like newly accessible, daily. And so when my buddy and I found out, the first thing we did was we went to WCW.com, and WCW.com popped up like normal, but then the screen shattered like broken glass and it redirected to the WWF.com. And we thought that was the coolest thing ever. So
I'm
yeah,
just
they
thinking.
took out the website, but I think my main takeaway from this was it was a dream come true because we were watching both these companies competing for all these years, trading talent back and forth, ratings battles, taking shots at each other, and now they're gonna be under one roof, and it's gonna be like a Super Bowl situation, right? Going into it.
Yeah, I remember it was really odd for me. I would have been in sort of high school at the time this happened, and you know how there's always that one kid who pretends that he knows what's going on. I remember. Well, here's the weird thing. A couple of months earlier, he probably about December time, he'd said, here's a list of things he said. I don't know why I remember out of all the things that all the conversations we had in school. I don't remember why this is the one that sticks. He said that Shane McMahon was gonna come back, having reason he'd been away so long was he bought WCW and he was going to come back, and Kevin Nash was going to then get a WWF contract, and there was something else he stated that also came true, and it's just really weird that within a year of him saying this, all this stuff happened, and it was like it's one of those things. And but yeah, no, I remember going to the WCW website the day after, and there just being Shane McMahon's face there, stating, "Oh, I'm now the most powerful person in wrestling because I own 100% of WCW and 25% of the WWF." Which,
Wow, that's cool. Shane
yeah,
O'Mac, man.
which of course got retconned when they brought Ric Flair in and was like, "Oh, well, Shane sold his part of the WWF to buy it." But still,
Yeah, you're right though. Shane did sell as part of WWF, but that was they had to like they didn't create that part of the story till later.
trying to think how I felt at the time. It's just I remember being disappointed that there wasn't going to be any sort of like WCW TV because I didn't have like Sky or cable at the time, so the only WCW I was watching was once a week. We had a show called WCW Worldwide,
Oh
which
no, you were
was
watching worldwide only. That's sad. I'm sorry to hear that, buddy.
well, it's not. It was a roundup show. So it would start with the
Oh, I've
first
seen
couple of
it.
matches. It'd start the first couple of matches from Saturday night. Then you'd have like the middle matches from Thunder, and then you'd have like the end of Nitro. So they were going backwards through the week, and quite early into
Oh
the run, they
wow,
went from
backwards.
saying this is a roundup show to this is a whole show, and it's a case of well, one, the ropes and the set is changing, and two, no, it's not. But because it was about a month or so behind, I was still like, well, at least I'll still have like the last month or two to watch. No, they just cut it the day the WWF bought it, which was a big disappointment for me.
Yeah, 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 definitely. That was
And then,
definitely
of course,
the worst part was that they were losing TV. You know, I guess for me, I would have preferred them to keep the TV and have the Bischoff Fusion sale go through, and then have Bischoff start running WCW with Fusion Technologies, and then he was going to bring in RVD, bring in Joey Styles, all these different things they say, Big Bang, all that stuff. I would rather have seen
yeah,
that.
I've seen some of the posters that were sort of floating around. Yeah, I mean, they were certainly building to that because they were writing off all like the baby faces with the idea they'd all come back at this one event, and of course that never happened. That would have been nice to see. But yeah, I mean, because the main reason they pulled out was because of the loss of TV. Whereas I believe there was a rumor that Vince was going to turn Raw to WCW Nitro, but
Yes. Along the way, I think Bruce Pritchard, maybe somebody said we were going to change one of our shows to WCW, but the network didn't like that idea because the network paid for WWF, branded TV. So that was one thing that
yeah,
stopped them from doing that was the network.
yeah. So if I remember right, they also they were rumored to be interested a few months earlier, but again the same thing came up of the networks got involved, and that's what killed off them spending what would have been considerably more than they ended up spending. But still, we got the invasion angle out of it, which is a
Oh, we
thing that
got the worst
happened.
invasion angle imaginable.
There was,
It started off good though, because the very beginning when Mike Awesome came in and power bombed, I don't remember who it was, Lance Storm maybe, and he won the hardcore title. I thought that was a super cool moment, and I thought it was a hot start, and I thought it was going to be a great invasion, but it was a dud. I mean, overall, I did go to the SummerSlam following up the invasion pay-per-view though.
that must have been pretty good, because that was they sort of had a hot streak of SummerSlams for a good few years there. With so that was what, like the Austin Angle main event, which was one of the best matches of the year,
Yeah,
and
Rock, Booker T, Austin Angle, RVD, Jeff Hardy ladder match.
That's weird to think. A WWF pay per view that was headlined by the WCW title. I mean,
Yeah,
that certainly was a surprise to me. Just the thought of that.
yeah, that's
But yeah,
crazy.
I
You're right
mean,
though. WCW title headlining WWF pay per view.
but yeah, I mean, but like I said, these subjects have been covered a lot. So one thing that sort of happened on that Raw that we should probably talk about is one of the promos that Vince did, where he's essentially fired a couple of talent on air. One of them being Bill Goldberg, the other being a certain Jeff Jarrett. That's really where this whole thing sort of kicks off from. The whole, he spells his name Jeff. Well, by the end of the night, he'll spell it Gone.
Yep. Good old Double J.
Now, not to speculate, but I think it's pretty well accepted that the reason that Jarrett never got a phone call from Vince, at least till 2019, involved a little incident in, I believe it was October 1999, where Jarrett was booked to lose to China on pay-per-view, but his contract expired the day before, and he believed he was owed a lot of money, and the figure that's been floated is around 200 grand. He got
Yeah,
paid to do that
it was
last match.
definitely six figures.
If you're gonna go out, make it worth your while, and I think it's fair to say he certainly did on that instance.
Yeah, here's a fun fact from Jeff Jarrett's podcast. He actually he was telling Vince because he thinks if I tell Vince I want this money, so Jeff was under the assumption that the money was owed to him because he was kind of screwed over on some house shows that he didn't go, whatever. But he was on the assumption the money was owed to him. He talked to Vince. Vince said, okay, no problem. There was no hostility there. But the thing is Jeff asked for the payout from the building, not from the WWF, because he figured if Vince cut a check for him, by the time he got to the bank, the check would be canceled. So what happened was Jeff got a cut from the payout from the building to the WWF.
Well, I mean, that's a safe assumption. Although everyone I've ever spoken to about Vince says if he says he's going to pay you something, he will pay you something, because it's
Yeah, I mean, right. That's true too. Absolutely. I'm sure Vince, I mean, Vince probably is a man of his word. He's a lot of things, and a man of his word is probably one of them.
Well, people have said to me he has this weird thing where he actually enjoys paying them. At least paying the boys. Paying music rights, that's more of an issue for him. But yeah, it's like he
More of an issue
almost
for
sort of
Paul
gets
Heyman
something from
too.
it. Yeah, I mean, there's like an old story from years ago about Bad News Brown. He got like a royalty check through the mail one day. What had happened was there'd been like a warehouse find of like, I can't remember what it was, but it had like about 5 or 6 wrestler sort of images on, and he was one of them. So he got like a random, like, it was something ridiculous, like 47 cents or something, just on like this warehouse find that they just sort of sold off at a reduced rate. And it was just like, it cost me more to go to the bank to cash it than I
Right?
got from,
The stamp is worth more than the actual check.
yeah.
Not in those days, but it is now.
So yeah, obviously with Jarrett gone, he's free to sort of, well, he lived the summer, living the life of luxury, but it really kind of put us on the path for what we're doing today.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, he really had to go out and find or create himself other opportunities because WCW was gone and the WWF closed its doors to him.
to be fair, a lot of things a lot of promotions cropped up in 2001. I don't know if
You know
they were
who else
trying to
was in
fill
a
the gap.
similar situation was Road Dog Jesse James, because he was in a situation where they were like, either go to rehab or there's the door. And he was like, all right, well, screw you guys, I'm out. And he went to WCW, and they're like, Shane just bought us. And so like he was asked out as well at that point.
Yeah, he was actually supposed to be on the first show. We'll get to. I don't think I actually put his name in the notes, but it came to me earlier. But we'll touch on him, I think, towards the end of the show, actually. But yeah, so I mean, like, a load of new promotions did show up in 2001 for. Although I think one of them on the list in front of me is still here, but the five I've got
Wow.
the list in front of me are the XWF, which I think we'll touch on briefly shortly.
Yeah, I
MECW, which
do want to touch on that one specifically.
yeah, no, we're going to touch on that one when we talk Steve Corino shortly.
Was
01
XPW defunct at this point, or is it still active?
XPW. I think XPW was around for another couple of years.
Okay, okay, okay.
So yeah, 01 in Japan. We've got, for some reason, I put WEW on the list. Women's erotic wrestling. That's a misleading name. I'm
No,
gonna
there was a WEW. It wasn't erotic. It was something else, wasn't it? Like
the
extreme. Like I remember
the, the,
WEW.
the on the list of promotions that started in 2001, the WEW
Maybe
I
not
found
necessarily, because maybe I'm thinking of a different
was the
time.
women's wrestling one, and no, it's so badly put together. The Wrestling with Regret YouTube channel have covered some of their releases, and they're all degrees of awful. I've also got USA Championship Wrestling on this list, which again we will touch on later in the show. But I mean, do you, out of the ones I've listed off there, do you have sort of any memories of them? Anything sort of jumping out at you from that list?
No, none of those. I mean, XWF or XW, was it XWF or XFW? You said.
XWF, yeah,
Yeah, the Hogan one, right? I know a little bit
yes,
about that one. I kind of want to dive more into it. I don't know much about it, but I don't know anything about the other ones you listed. I'd never heard of USA Pro. The one that I know of came along around that time, maybe a little later, was the WWA Australia World Wrestling All Stars.
yeah. No, that's what we're going to be sort of going there next.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the next stop on the tour. Yeah, no, USA Championship Wrestling it's only on the list basically because it does sort of play in. It is right at the bottom of the format there, but
Who do
it
you know
is
who
good.
founded that promotion?
What the the
USA.
USA, that's Burt Prentice.
Okay, I don't know who that is, but that's cool.
But since you sort of brought it up, yeah, let's go on to the sort of WWA. Um,
Well, hold
I
on a
just
second.
remember.
Let's touch on the Hogan Federation. Do you have any information on kind of how that came to be, or what do you have on that?
No, that show never made it to air. I was gonna plug my old podcast, but no, that episode never made it to air. Um, that one, I could track down the show notes, but that one is so it's not actually Hogan who owned it. He was,
Was he just the face of it?
yeah, I mean, technically, he almost wasn't that at one point. You kind of because there was so many creative sort of differences between the two sides. It just you had if you I
I remember like they had some names like Kurt Hennig was there. I remember
yeah,
that. I think he was even their champion.
no, he was
And
not the
then
champion, but he
and then
was
I thought
there.
it was interesting because they said the X didn't stand for anything.
Yeah, that was weird. I was saying that I've over here we had the XWA. Technically, the X never stood for anything. It's just it was a spin-off of the FWA, and it's like X kind of sounds like F, so
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I can see if it's a spinoff. Yeah.
yeah.
And I
But
guess
yeah, no,
Hogan was trying to do the X. I guess it's not Hogan that started it, but I guess they're trying to do the X Wrestling Federation.
yeah, it's. I mean, it was 2001. That is quite a thing that a lot of people did. Over here in the UK, we had someone trying to start the Wrestle Express with an X,
Did you
which
know that fast forward about 20 years, they would somebody would buy Twitter and rename that to X. They're still doing it.
yeah,
The X doesn't stand for anything. What the hell?
if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And
I've
a
heard
lot of
that.
people are
Who
falling.
says that?
I don't know, but when you sort of think about the guy who runs X, it's like, yeah, no, a lot of people are falling for whatever he's sort of throwing
Yep,
out there.
absolutely. But yeah, so the XWF was pretty interesting. Hogan, was the face of it. Jimmy Hart, I thought Jimmy Hart owned it, but maybe not. It was
No,
good. It
he
was good, but
was.
I never watched it.
He, no, he was in an office. Yeah, so they only released. So a handful of episodes got released on DVD years later.
Oh wow, that's
I
it.
think it was like,
That's all that came out was on DVD years later.
yeah, I think they recorded over like 2 or 3 days, like a load of episodes. But only yeah, like six or something made it onto DVD.
Wow.
Like there's Hogan got talked into having one match on like episode 9. That match is also out there. It's him against Henning. I mean, if you're a Hogan fan, it is probably the best Hogan TV match. Or the it's the closest Hogan was to Hogan in the mid 90s. He never gets into that shape again, which is well, it's the
Oh,
trick that Father Time can pull you.
interesting.
It's not like it's a fantastic match, but it is just like mid 90s Hogan boiled down to its most basic essence, and it's against Kurt Hennig, so obviously Henning's fantastic, just sort of
Yeah, like
bouncing
didn't he
off.
die like 2 years later, or not even 2 years later, right? Yeah, he died in
Yeah,
'04.
yeah, we actually are going to cover his last match, and that is going to be
Okay,
a painful experience.
okay,
Um,
I'm ready for that.
well, yeah, it's against David Flair, so
Oh no!
and of course it was booked by Russo, so it involves something on a pole.
Wow.
So yeah, we've got that to look forward to. Offhand, I can't remember what pay-per-view it is, but yeah, that is definitely something we'll be looking at.
So
Uh,
Australian entrepreneur Andrew McManus, he started a wrestling promotion. Jeff Jarrett, helped him out a little bit, I think, with that to get that kind of off the ground. But yeah, World Wrestling All Stars. My buddy and I, we bought, I think, 2 or 3 of their pay-per-views because we thought that they were going to be the alternative. At first they were looking like they were going to be the alternative at first, and it was interesting to say the least. I think the main event of the first one was it was a tournament. I think the main event was Jeff Jarrett Road Dogg in a cage, if I do remember correctly.
yeah, yeah. So we'll because on the Patreon, the idea for the Patreon is we're going to be covering TNA matches that happened in other promotions, and there were the last two WWA pay-per-views featured TNA matches. So we'll be
Yeah, in
covering
fact,
at least the last two pay. We might do all. There are only 5 pay-per-views, so we could
there's only
if we find a
5.
time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Um, yeah.
And we
So
could talk
the
about how Nathan Jones got plucked out of obscurity, became a superstar, and then quit.
yeah, weirdly, his last WWA appearance, because all the pay-per-views aired on tape delay, with the exception of the one they filmed in the States, appeared after his first appearance on SmackDown.
Oh, interesting. I did not realize that.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that that happened. I think technically it was actually I think he had his developmental contract at the time, but they just let him sort of fulfill the dates, and it was just unfortunate. It was like a pay-per-view taping, one of them.
Oh wow, because I always thought they discovered him from that.
I mean, it may well have been that may well have sort of been how he came to their attention. But yeah, that his last. I wasn't planning on going this far ahead on the timeline, so I've only sort of got up to like about the second pay-per-view in my notes in front of me.
That's okay. I mean, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I'm getting excited.
Well, it's great that you show that you've got that interest. It hopefully is going to sort of see that we see this thing through to the end. But yeah, so they did. So yeah, like you said, they had they did the Australia tour, and then they did a tour over here in the UK towards the end of 2001. That's as far as I'm aware, that's like the first time someone like the WCW guys had worked since the end of WCW due to them being on Time Warner contracts, which on the Jeff. So under your advice, I sort of listened to some of the Jarrett episodes, and he stated that his lawyer essentially said, "Well, they're not the no compete clause doesn't really apply because you're not competing with anything," which is why he took the WWA bookings.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
and I was actually quite surprised when he stated that Russo was nothing to do with these tours, because just the way, especially that first pay-per-view was booked, it was like this really feels like one of his products.
Yeah, didn't they have what did they have? They had bananas and pajamas, but they called them fruits and suits. Is that right? Do I remember that right? Fruits and suits?
I definitely remember them being bananas in pajamas there. I
Yeah,
don't
I
remember.
remember that. Absolutely. That was weird.
Is that something you have over there? Is it a reference you got? Because I know because it's
I
a
mean, it
kids.
is, but why? Like so in 2001, I was like 19, 20, 21, something like
Yeah,
this, right? And bananas and pajamas are for children. So
yeah,
I'm like, what is this? Why is this happening? And then wasn't it Kwee and Lenny Lane? Wasn't it Lenny and Lodi or something?
yeah. It's been a while since I've seen that, but
That's something I think I blocked out of my memory. The bananas and pajamas thing in WWE.
one thing I remember about the pay per view is they piped in the commentary, which, as someone who's worked in wrestling as an announcer, it's one of those things that as a fan sounds like a good idea. In practice, it's really not, because if you've got a heel cheating in the ring and your announcer is saying, "Oh, look, the heel's cheating on the ring," you kind of undermining the referee if he doesn't turn around and goes, "Oh, look, he's cheating in the ring." It's it's just simple things like that. It kills moments like that. I
But I
find
think isn't the
personally.
commentary supposed to acknowledge what the audience at home can see, even though the referee doesn't
Yeah,
see it?
yeah, but if it's being
Like he's got brass knuckles, even though the referee doesn't see it.
yeah, but when it's being piped into the arena, the ref, the referee can hear you say it. It's
Oh, they're saying it into the arena.
Do you not hear that? Do you not remember that? I mean,
I mean,
I guess if
I
you
don't remember that the commentary was into the arena. No, I don't remember that.
yeah, and
Were they
apparently
doing
they
it on
did it
just
on
microphones?
Well, they just sort of they just piped
Okay, okay,
the commentary from into the PA system. They apparently did it
okay.
on the house shows
That
as well,
I
which
agree with
is
you in that case, and that does make the referee look really stupid.
although Jarrett was like, "Oh no, we kind of made it work," and I'm just sort of thinking, but I mean that is just one more sign of how McManus didn't really know what he was
I
doing.
mean, if he knew what he was doing, there'd be more than 5 pay-per-views.
Yeah, well, we sort of kind of glazed over it, but the reason he started working with Jarrett was because he actually did promote a show in Australia over that summer. But it's not that it didn't draw well; it's that he brought over too much expensive talent, and so it works at a loss. So he brought
Makes
in,
sense. I mean, because he not
yeah,
only had to pay the talent, but he also had to fly him to across the world, put him in hotels, pay for
yeah.
food, pay for whatever. But yeah, I can see that. He should have just started off with mostly Australian talent and brought in like 1 or 2 guys from the US and then just built it up from there.
Yeah, and I mean, you sort of look back through any promotion, you can pick apart any sort of small
Oh
things
yeah,
that anyone could have done.
absolutely.
Uh, So yeah,
Absolutely.
on the 26th of October, they filmed the show that became the first pay-per-view, and that was aired in the States on the 6th of January, which, interestingly, is the dates in Jerry Jarrett's book where Jarrett phoned his dad up and says, "I've got this idea for a wrestling promotion. Can you sort of come over and we can sort of discuss some ideas with me?" And that becomes the germ of which the TNA comes out of.
Wow. So WWA's first pay-per-view aired in January of 2002.
Yeah,
Wow. And so if you think about it, they went for 5 months. And if they started in January, I mean, unofficially, I guess, they're running through May, and then TNA starts in June. So it's kind of like just like building this momentum and then passing the baton in a way.
it is. I mean, literally, their last pay per view is the
A
title.
crossover pay-per-view, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
According to Jarrett's book, they already have they already have a name for this new promotion that Jarrett's working on. Do you know what that name is?
Tuesday Night All-Stars?
Close. That is a name that seems to have cropped up a lot because I was doing in my research. I found something I wrote for 20 wrestling 20 years ago podcast, and I used that name, but no, that is not the original name they were going with. The name they were going with was Tuesday Night Attitude.
Oh, that would I would not like that as a young young adult wrestling fan, because I would feel that would be trying to copy the WWF too much.
Yeah, that was exactly my thought, especially in 2002, where the Attitude Era is kind of done. It's really just
Yeah,
kind of a
that too.
hangover.
It's almost like you're trying to hold on to something that's kind of not there anymore in a
Yeah,
way.
but in the
It's
same
like
vein,
it's like Jeff Jarrett calling his promotion attitude is like when the uncool dad starts to like use a phrase, and then the cool people don't use that phrase anymore.
I think that's a fair assessment of that. I mean, what do you think of the Tuesday Night All Stars name if they'd have gone with that?
I would have liked it. I would have liked it. So from what I heard was it was supposed to be Tuesday night All Stars, and their deal was supposed to go through for Tuesdays, and then at the last minute, like, oh, we can't do Tuesdays, we can only do Wednesdays, and so they had to scramble to change the name, and that's when they came up with Total Nonstop Action, because they're already married to the TNA letters.
Yeah,
But I would
there
have been
is
into
someone
Tuesday
who
Night All Stars.
see. I don't know. As a name for a TV show, Tuesday Night All Stars, that's fine. As a name for a promotion, that doesn't really sound like an upstart promotion for
You're
me. That
right. You're
sounds
absolutely right about that. It sounds like WCW Tuesday Night All Stars.
as a name for a promotion to me, it sounds like I don't know what the American equivalent would be, but over here, a lot of the UK promotions go through. I do run the holiday camp circuit over the summer, and for those who don't know what a British holiday camp is, basically picture a trailer park um, with a swimming pool. Um, But yeah,
Right.
and so and throughout the summer, these camps they sort of bring in like all sorts of entertainers, and one of those is All Star Wrestling, which is run by a guy. Well, was run by a guy called Brian Dixon. It's now.
I've heard of All Star Wrestling, and that's more of a name though than Tuesday Night All Stars.
Mm, but the point is, it doesn't sound like a young upstart promotion. It sounds like someone you'd see at the holiday camps between the
Yeah,
kids
right.
club and the local magician. Oh, I can speak today.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, but you're right though. It does. It sounds like a one-off show name. It doesn't sound like a
Yeah.
promotion name. You're absolutely right about that. And it's like, why would you put a day of the week in the title of your promotion? That really
Mm.
pigeonholes you. Like, imagine if eventually you were gonna, because the weekly pay-per-view model, whatever, whatever, whatever. But then it's like, yeah, well, we want to be on TV eventually, right? Are we going to be on Tuesdays? What if they put us on Thursdays? But we've been using this name for 3 years. Like it just, I feel like it just pigeonholes you to put a day of the week as the name of your promotion.
Yeah. Apparently, there's only one person who's actually said this, and it's the man himself. But Russo heavily influenced the TNA name
I
because
could
it
see
sounded
that.
like TNA,
Yeah.
which is one of the more Russo things I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, and let's get some go-go dancers and we'll focus on their butts a little bit, between shots, between matches and everything, and we'll be good.
Yeah, they do something like
Oh
that with
my
the
gosh,
cage
dude,
girls.
I watched the first TNA a few like maybe 6 months ago or something, just for fun. For fun. But yeah, it's very like I was watching with my wife, and there's some scenes where I'm just like awkward, it's like it's really like they're focusing on their butts like for a long time.
Yeah, no, there is reason for that, which I'll go into when we
Yeah, we'll get
do
into that. I'm
the.
I'm a few months ahead of us.
Well, I mean that's only the next episode, so we'll go into it more then. Um, so yeah, so they've got this sort of set up, and they just need so from here they need to sort of get some funding together, and they do actually come at this point come across the XWF guys because Kevin Sullivan, who was booking for the XWF, went to Jerry for some ideas, and Jerry just sort of looked at what they were doing and was like, "It might just be easier for your guys to sort of cut and run at this point because they've been trying to get like TV for 3 months and nothing happened. And they
And
stuck
then and
around for
then
like,
just to give a little bit of context to what you just said, Jerry Jarrett was the fixer. They would bring Jerry Jarrett into promotions that were not doing well, and he would turn them around back in the territory days.
well, not only that, in I believe it was 1993 when it looked like Vince might be going away for a while.
Yeah,
Uh,
that too. They brought in Jerry to run the company if they needed him to.
Yeah, because they knew that Jerry didn't want it. So when it came time to give it back, he would have no problem doing that, which is sensible enough. Apparently, he turned down WCW 5 times because he was just like, no, this whole operation doesn't work. And
Wow.
he was definitely proven right on that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely was. Good old Jerry Jarrett, man. I have a story to tell you about Jerry Jarrett, but I'm gonna wait until we get to somewhere where we can talk about the 2004 Victory Road pay per view because it's in that trip.
Okay, all right. That's that's a couple of years down the line at this
I
point, but
know, man.
so that'll be where we're kicking off season 2, probably.
Yeah. If we don't make it that far, then we'll make it the finale episode.
Also, just should be noted around the time they're sort of trying to get all their financing stuff together. ROH have their first ever show on the 23rd of February. Did you watch much like the early ROH stuff?
A little bit of it. I followed it online. I didn't really have much access to watch it. So let's talk about how our Ring of Honor was kind of born. So there's a wrestling video website called, should we say it? RF Video? You can edit that
Yeah,
out if
why
you want.
not?
Okay, whatever. So my buddy and I, we knew of RF Video because we would buy wrestling tapes from the old ECW fan camp stuff, right? But when ECW went out of business, the fan cam industry wasn't very good for this tape company, and so they started running their own shows, which led to Ring of Honor, which was a standalone one night. I don't know if it was a one night, but it was like a one-off tournament, and then that is what led to kind of this whole independent revolution, which is Ring of Honor kind of ushered that in, I think.
Yeah, Ring of Honor definitely sort of a big part of that. I mean, I did try when I was sort of downloading those wrestling videos or file sharing sites, try some of the Ring of Honor stuff, and I mean, the action was brilliant. Especially the time, especially when I was younger, I was really into like the super indie stuff they were doing.
Yeah, it
But
was amazing. Like the stuff they were doing at the time was so revolutionary. And it was a time, I feel like it was a time frame where the territories, the last of the territories were kind of going away and the independent wrestling was beginning. Like it was a beautiful time in wrestling, and they were doing some great stuff in Ring of Honor.
yeah, I my only issue with it was I just found the production quality was just low. I was
Yeah,
struggling to.
absolutely was. It was awful. It was awful. It was like when you do get your hands on Ring of Honor, it was almost unwatchable, really. You had to be there. I never went there, but you had to be there.
Well, let's just say I know why Ring of Honor took so long between the second and the third UK tour. We're talking over a decade, um,
Wow.
and there's probably similar reasons to what happened in Japan. Basically, there's a reason there's a Dragon Gate USA and Dragon Gate UK, and it is essentially because of what happened on their overseas tours. But I'm not sure what the statute of limitations is on this, so I'm not going to say it on air.
I don't know what you're talking about. I would like to know. Also, I did not know there was a Dragon Gate UK. That's pretty interesting.
It's not really a promotion in itself. It's just I don't know if they still do it, but it was like a yearly tour. They do like a load of dates, just bring over like all the top Dragon Gate guys. Um,
But is it a shoot off of the Dragon Gate Japan?
yeah,
Okay, okay, cool.
I mean I can tell you off air, but I'm not sure if
That's
this
okay.
one's
Yeah, we don't
still.
want to incriminate anybody, except for that story about 2004 when I'm going to incriminate myself. But we'll build anticipation for that.
Okay. Um, yeah. Because actually, quite early on, TNA actually features on an ROH show, which again, that's going to be a Patreon thing, because there's a triple threat X Division title, which we will cover
There was an X
closer to the
Division
sun.
title match in Ring of Honor.
Yeah, it's the
Wow,
crowning of a champion show in July.
I did
So
not know.
yeah,
I did not know that.
sorry. Okay, well, we will be covering that on the Patreon.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so the day after the first Ring of Honor show is the only ever US World Wrestling All Stars show.
What was the date of Ring of Honor? Was it January of '02 then?
So that was 23rd of February.
Okay, okay, the end of
So
February.
so 24th of February you have WWA in Las Vegas, which is, I mean, I hear upstart wrestling promotion in Las Vegas, and I just think, is that really gonna work? And I was listening to the Jarrett podcast, and he agreed with me for the very same reasons. Vegas is where it's such a transient community. It's a case of, are you going to have the people sort of there on a regular basis? I mean, if you're doing it as a one-off Vegas pay-per-view, people are not necessarily in Vegas for wrestling. They're there for, well, the casinos and the entertainment
Yeah,
surrounding that.
yeah. They're
It's
there
so
for
you've
the
got a
strip.
lot. Yeah, so you've got a lot to compete with there. Um,
I
so
don't know. I
yeah,
mean, nowadays, there's the AEW goes to Vegas and they do really well.
hmm, I know AEW. There is something about AEW that, at least the first couple of years, that they just couldn't. The fans wanted them to succeed so much they weren't going to let them fail. Um, and
But there's also a
that's
pandemic within 6 or 8 months after they opened.
yeah. But you sort of look at like all the shows that actually could have people in. They were always pretty much sold out, and I'm pretty sure even if people weren't making it because they just wanted AEW to survive, they were just buying the tickets just so they'd
Yeah.
have the money, which yeah, it sort of says something for the fan base. So yeah, the Vegas pay per view and the build up to that is really where the McManus and the Jarrett relationship sort of kind of starts to come apart, really. because McManus wanted Randy Savage as his top star, and so he would focus on trying to bring Savage in, and kind of got away from bringing in Jarrett, which Randy Savage in 2002. It would have been 2 years since his last TV appearance. So that would have been a selling point if nothing else. Do you
Yeah.
remember his last TV appearance?
I can't say I remember his last TV appearance. I remember his last TV gimmick, like his run, I guess,
Yeah,
overall, but I can't say I remember his specific last appearance.
I think we covered it on the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast a few years ago. But you remember when WCW did their big reset and they had the New Blood and the Millionaires Club?
Yes.
So
And Randy
one
Savage
of
had the
the
slick back ponytail, right?
Yeah, so Savage hasn't been seen in months at this point, but one of the early Thunders is, I want to say, one of the worst Thunders ever, but
Aren't
that's
they
not a
all the
high
worst thunders
bar.
ever?
Yeah, they're all pretty bad. It's So basically Russo comes out at the start and is like, "Yeah, no referees tonight. We're going under New York rules.
What?
You can
I
Yeah,
had
no,
never
the show
missed Thunder,
doesn't.
but I don't remember this.
Oh man, this
No referees.
Yeah, this was really bad. So yeah, no referee. So basically, matches were just kind of happening between New Blood and Millionaires Club members, and I think there was like a Mike Awesome match where someone got pinned who wasn't even in the match, and it was 2000 WCW. That's just how they went, and the last match was like this big battle royal, and just you sort of had like New Blood members and then Millionaire Club members,
Oh,
and then
what's
just
funny is my wife and I do a podcast called a Hypothetical Wrestling where we get super baked. I mean, we just watch
yeah.
wrestling and we just kind of make fun of it. And that was one of our first episodes, that battle royal. It was insane. It didn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, and yeah, you just had sort of Savage just randomly turn up for like the first time in months,
Okay,
and
I did see that then because I did that episode. That was a little over a year ago.
yeah, so that is his last TV appearance to
Okay,
this
I remember
point.
his last TV appearance then. Also, I
So
wanted to
yeah,
ask you. I've never heard of New York style wrestling. Have you heard of New York style comedy, like a New York style comedy show?
is that one where you have to bring like 7 people to get like 3 minutes or something?
No, that is called a bringer show, and I don't think that is exclusive to any region. No, well, I was in a comedy show one time, and they said we're going to do it New York style. What New York style is every comic introduces after their set's done, they introduce the next comic.
I've done a couple of gigs like that,
That's
and
crazy. I did that one time, but yeah, that's New York style. They don't waste time with the host.
well, I mean, realistically, you got the start of the show and then the bit after the interval, and then really they're just bringing people on off outside of that. So,
Yeah, that's true.
but yeah, I
Anyways,
have done some gigs like that, and some of them are actually some of them aren't bad. It's just it just keeps it flowing a bit sort of better. Um, Not to undersell some of the great MCs we have out there on the scene, obviously.
see, the thing is, I love hosting. I love hosting. I love like kind of like saying a couple lines about somebody after a set's over, whatever, and then going on to the next person. I love that. So that's kind of why I feel like undermined about that, because I'm like, what about me? I want to host.
No, I can see. Yeah, if it's a sort, if you enjoy that side of comedy, yeah, then yeah, I can see why it feels shortchanged. And yeah, and depending on how your gets put together, because mine, I sort of have like a finish and boom, I'm done, I'm off, and then to sort of have to say, do my bit, and then be like, oh, and now it's this guy. Yeah, it does kind of
Yeah.
take the edge of that sort of full stop.
The WWA New York style. Oh no, WCW New York style.
Oh yeah, so they're trying to get Savage. Actually, they tried to get Savage in for this show, but it didn't happen, and it ended up. They ended up getting Brian Christopher instead. Yeah, that sounds like a fair trade-off.
No comment.
I, to be fair, that would have been 9 months after he got released from WWE, so he still would have had a bit of name value. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, skipping ahead a few months here. I feel like his name value went down every week, but at this point, it was the hottest it could have been.
Yeah. At this point, I think the Jarrett and McManus relationship had soured because Jarrett refused to drop the title on pay-per-view. He did eventually drop a house show a few months later, but yeah, at this
You're
point,
being generous. Those are all house shows.
well,
Some of
house.
those
If you,
house shows got put on pay per view months later.
I mean, some would say anything that's not televised is a house show. So they had 5 non-house shows, but then
Yeah, I
again,
know, I know.
Ring of Honor famously also puts a couple of their house shows on internet pay-per-view, but no one could watch them on Go Fight Live, so they were technically still house shows. But moving away from that, so yeah, apparently reading Jarrett's book, the production on this pay-per-view, I've not seen this particular pay-per-view. Apparently, it was so bad he was actually concerned that it might sort of kill any sort of momentum they had, sort of getting into the pay-per-view business.
Wow.
Right, okay, so I'm gonna just we're gonna start talking about the pay-per-view stuff here. Here in the UK, especially at the time, since we've done the digital switch over, we have more options. But our main option was if you either had Sky TV and you could order stuff through the box office, or you just didn't have pay-per-view. I mean, what's the situation over there in the States with the pay-per-view options? Is it just you have the one provider, or do you sort of have
Yeah,
options?
so at this time, because now, I mean, now it's the Wild West, you can get pay per view from anywhere. But like at the time, it was like, your cable provider would have contracts with the pay per view providers, right? So like when I was a kid, we would get shows. It was called Request, the pay per view channel, and then went through different names and different versions, whatever. But there's essentially, I think, maybe 3 different channels that you can get through your cable service in the U.S. with us.
All right. So yeah, because around this time, Jarrett's negotiating with In Demand. So are you aware of what that company is? Because
Yeah, I'm
I
aware
like
of them. I don't know. I'm not aware of them in 2001 though.
yeah. Well, no, it's like I said over here. It's a case of yeah. We if you either have Sky, which I didn't at the time. I didn't have Sky at the time, but if you had it on, you either ordered something through Sky Box Office or you didn't watch it.
Right. Yeah. Same here. I mean, we had cable, so it would have
Yeah.
been. I can't even think of what the cable was called. Back then, um, like what Cox is in Canada. Like, I don't know. But we had cable, and so you had to like order it through your cable, or you don't watch it. Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And they bill you. They send you they add it to your cable bill.
So In Demand is the company that the Jarretts are talking to. They've got a representative called Jay Houseman, who we will be going into, I think, in episode either 3 or 4,
Okay.
because he turns out not to be quite who they thought he was.
Yeah. All right. I remember. I heard about that on Jared's podcast. He's
Yeah.
not really. Never mind. Yeah, yeah. There's a houseman I don't like that's in wrestling journalist, but that's neither here nor there.
With the bad production from the WWE pay-per-view, Jarrett's worried that they might lose ground. However, around this time, Vince has just upped his demand with direct TV from 50% of the gross to 60%, which is unheard of at the time. And In Demand are worrying they're going to have to sort of give in to his demands. However, it doesn't. It with the Jarrett's offer on the table, they at least have some leverage to stop that happening. Also, around this time, Vince was thinking of doing Wednesday night pay-per-views, which would have been not wrestling events, but would have been like what they later did on like the DVDs or like the documentaries and stuff.
Oh wow, that's
So,
interesting. Okay,
so
like
that
not
was
pay per
what,
view shows, like not like a wrestling event, but like a wrestling like show, right? Like
yeah,
a
like,
like a
like
documentary or something.
yeah, like the sort of documentaries they did on like the DVDs.
Interesting.
So that's what was on the table for In Demand at the time. Um, Obviously, In Demand, they're sort of not got a great amount coming in from the wrestling compared to what they had previously. What with a loss of WCW and ECW. Interestingly, In Demand, at least according to a Paul Heyman interview I heard, is part of the reason ECW folded. Now, you're going to have to take this with a pinch of salt because, like I said, this is coming from a Paul Heyman interview. So none of this could be true. But basically, for the last ECW pay per view, the way ECW finances worked is they could fall in and out of the black into the red by a couple of million, but they knew they had regular incoming in that would just send it the other way. And basically, they were waiting for their money from the last ECW pay per view, and In Demand basically turned around and said, "We're going to hold on to this because we don't think you'll be around in a few weeks." And that is essentially what caused the death knell for ECW, according to Paul Heyman in that particular interview.
Wow. I'm gonna add the whole TNN deal too, because TNN screwed them over really bad. They never really ran ads. Do you remember that little shoot promo that Paul Heyman did on ECW where he's like, the network's gonna take me off the air for this? Or he's all, come on, network, I dare you, network. Do you remember that?
I think I've seen it on one of the ECW documentaries. Yeah,
His point was the network doesn't air commercials for them. It only runs their commercials during their show, which doesn't accomplish anything. They're on like at midnight. They don't pay them much, and now they're going to give $1 billion to the WWF, and essentially they're going to cancel their TV deal because they have a chance to go with the WWF now. And so that was a huge nail in the coffin for ECW, was TNN completely pulling the rug out from under them and giving the entire rug to the WWF.
As Heyman said in this interview, In Demand doing that actually screwed themselves over, because without the ECW there, they had to rely on like the WWF and the WCW, and of course WCW would go under a very short time later. So to try and make up that shortfall, they were having to go through XPW and all the promotions like that, and I've seen some of those shows and they are garbage, and they were not drawing anything close to ECW numbers. So In Demand, if that is the reason ECW folded, kind of shot themselves in the foot there a bit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they kind of did too. And then on top of that, like all their big stars were getting signed left and right. Like by the time 2000 came, 2001 came, they were pick bone dry.
Yeah, there's there's a shoot interview with Cornette where I think it's a guest booker series, and he's sort of got like he's got like the ECW roster in front of him, and he's just like going through it, and it's like, is it any wonder this company folded when this is what they had on offer?
I mean, they had RVD, they had Tommy Dreamer, they had Rhino, Steve Corino. I mean, they had people they could build on, but they couldn't build it as fast as they were getting signed.
I mean, technically, Corino got signed from under them. We'll cover it. We'll cover that.
Okay, I did not know that.
We're going to cover that later. Don't worry, we'll get to that shortly.
Absolutely.
Dreamer as a wrestler is.
Dreamer as a wrestler isn't something that you is great and everything, but Dreamer as an ECW just persona in general was a pretty big. No, I want to say big deal, but it was pretty cool.
I mean, I've met Tommy and I got on with him, but no, it's solely an ECW thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the Jarretts are trying to get this agreement with In Demand, and essentially they've ended up getting the Wednesday night slot because Tuesday night is reserved mainly for like replays,
that makes sense. Yeah, the pay-per-view replays are always on Tuesdays. Yeah.
What In Demand wanted was $600,000 up front, which is, and the thing is, the Jarretts were not expecting that, because their guy Houseman had said, "We've got it all sorted. We just need to finalize the contracts, and this meeting is to get the contracts done." And they got told that, and they went quite reasonably. Went no.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing. I'm like, where am I supposed to get over $500,000 from?
Well, that's basically because they've not got financing sorted yet. That's literally all the money they have in this project.
Yeah, I can see that. If that much.
Well, yeah, it's literally Jeff actually put in everything he had, which I think is 600k, and Jerry put in like 300k. Yeah, essentially they walked out of that meeting and it was like, well, is this actually going ahead? Eventually, Jay Houseman phoned him back. I think in the next couple of days to say he'd renegotiated and got it down to 100k.
Oh wow.
Which, I mean, I can understand them wanting a deposit, but in the same vein, they're not the ones losing out. They're the ones who are just distributing them to the pay per view companies. If the pay per views don't make any money, all they've lost is the time and effort to distribute them. They've not actually lost anything. Whereas the Jarretts, of course, have everything sort of tied up in this.
Right.
Like I said, I'm not au fait with how the pay per view works over there. We're not. I don't have plans to go much further into this subject unless you've got anything to say. But it's just I'm throwing this out there now because, like I said, we will be revisiting this in 4 episodes' time, and I'm just trying to lay the groundwork for that when we come back to it.
So I never purchased a TNA pay-per-view. My friend did, and I just gonna give him money for it. So I don't really know how that worked. But as far as I know, there's two ways to do it. It was $10 a month standalone, or was it 20? Was it 20? Sorry, it was $10 a week, $10 a week, $9.99 a week, or something like this. I think it was like $25 a month, or $30 for the month. It was like, to where if you pay for the month instead, you get some kind of discount, right? So we would
Oh,
subscribe to it, and I would just give them, I forget how much money every month, and we would just watch the shows.
okay. Um, I do actually have. I'm going to throw it up on the socials probably in the next few days. But one of the first pay per view adverts. So like you'd see on the preview channel with is just Don West being Don West.
Buy the
Um,
card.
yeah, they're just like all they've got to advertise is Jarrett, Shamrock, and Hall, and it's just like, yeah, these 3 guys are going to be big stars. 9.95. Wednesdays will never be the same.
Dude, fucking when TNA first started, my friend and I, we both agreed there was something about Don West that was just familiar to us, and we just couldn't figure it out. We couldn't put our fingers on it. And then at some point in the future, I don't know how far down the line it is, but BG James did a parody of Don West, and he was like, "Buy the card." And as soon as he said that, we both knew where we knew Don West from: QVC television, selling baseball cards late at night.
Yeah, that's I've heard about. I've never sort of because we don't really do baseball cards over here, but I have heard
Yeah.
that's where they sort of picked him up from.
So in
Um,
the 80s, like growing up and stuff, there's a channel. Are you familiar with like Home Shopping Network kind of situation?
we have those sort of things over here. I
Okay,
think the
right.
ones we
So
have are mainly jewelry, but yeah,
things are good, things are chill, things are mellow. You can watch Home Shopping Network and be entertained, and like, we have this nice jewelry here, and you could buy this for $600. Just call this number below, and then now we have this item, right? But like, the thing about Don West when he was doing it is he was like yelling and screaming and getting like red in the face and going crazy. He's like, "Buy this card, we have this card, I got a Michael Jordan rookie card right here." And so like, it was something that like it's kind of stuck out in the crowd, and it was
yeah.
interesting. And I used to watch it as a kid, and then when I realized who he was, it all kind of came back to me that I used to watch him sell baseball cards as a kid.
I'm not sure where to go from it. Actually, what? We were talking about selling stuff. I'm just going to go on a quick aside, just to because I don't have a transition otherwise. But we're giving you a service here. We're giving you a service for nothing because we are generous people. However, we're going to try and sell you something right now. We're going to sell more of our content. If you're liking what we're doing, we have other content that is going to soon become available over on Patreon. You can check us out, Escaping the Asylum, or patreon.com/ETA pod, where you can sign up. If you sign up for, I think it's £4 a month, you can have us doing a post-show breakdown of each and every pay-per-view, where you can listen to us go over how the pay-per-views have held up in hindsight, and whether they're still historically relevant. Just our thoughts on that. You can for a bit more. You can have early access, so instead of having to wait till Wednesday, you can have them Monday morning. Listen to us on your way to work. And above that, we have watch-alongs and DVD reviews that will be coming as and when they fit in with the timeline. So join up to our Patreon today, because we're doing this for free because we love it, but we are putting a lot of time in, and we just like to know you appreciate that thought.
Hell yeah.
So
I think
patreon.com
I'll save my
/
2004 horror story for a Patreon episode. I think that'd be fun.
Okay.
I'm not going to incriminate myself for free, you know?
See right there, you've now got the hook. Are you gonna let's drag you out of the water and shake you down for change? Yeah, so we're talking about the fun they're having with In Demand. This is creating a lot of pressure on Jerry Jarrett, because so that was on the 5th of March. They had that meeting with the 600K. On the 17th of March, Jarrett has put together a show format that Jeff tweaked in a way he didn't like, and Jerry thinks it's off the back of Russo's interference, and basically says, "No, that's it. I'm not doing this."
Yeah.
Obviously, this doesn't last, but I'm going to take this moment to sort of go into the reasons why Jerry is given it and why he may or may not be right. There is the main reason seems to be Jerry Jarrett has written out this show.
Yeah, Jarrett and other Jarrett.
So he's written out this show in the way he would have done it for Memphis TV, a show that he did for the high ratings for 30 years. And Jeff has turned around and said and tweaked it and put himself and one of the other stars in the opening segment, which is not something Jerry sees as the way it should be done. He thinks main event stars should be saved for the main event. Sam, you've been a fan of wrestling for however many decades. What do you know about putting together a wrestling card? Just
well,
anything?
I play a game called Total Extreme Wrestling, which is a wrestling promotion simulator. So I put
Yeah.
together cards. I don't know if they're good, but I mean, I feel like I could collaborate. I don't know if I could do it by myself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I've spent some time in the industry, and I've kind of picked up at least the bare bones of how it's put together. And there's a couple of different ways you can put cards together. The way Jerry Jarrett does it is very traditional. It's the way a lot of like the territories did it. And there's a way, and it one of the reasons that the territories were very successful. It was a proven formula, which is essentially
Yeah, and then like I said earlier, Jerry Jarrett was very essential to some of these territories. So like he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, so the way he does it is essentially the later into the show you go, the bigger the stars, which is a fair way to go. You know, people know that if they've missed the first match, they've not missed anything important. But it's like going to a concert. You know, the band's on earlier. They're not necessarily there for who you're going to see. They're just something extra.
Yeah, but let me ask you a question. Let's say you went to go see U2, okay?
Yeah.
And you're in the crowd and you're getting ready for the first band to come on, but before the first band comes on, U2 comes out and like, hey everybody, we just want to say thank you for coming to the show. We're really excited to see you guys. We hope you have a great time. We'll see you later on tonight. And they leave. Wouldn't that be super cool?
But it's so yeah. So I'm going to sort of get into that. But yeah, no, that does sound like. I mean, if I was a U2 fan, yeah, no, that.
Oh, I figured I
would appreciate
you were. Sorry.
Well, I've nothing against them. It's just, yeah. But yeah, no, that's one way of looking at it. There's a couple of other ways of putting cards together. I think the best example of this is with comedy. The way you do comedy over there in the States, most of your shows are put together. You have the lesser known guys on first, and you work your way
Yeah,
up.
you're
Is
not
that
going to
right?
see the headliner at the beginning of the show for sure.
Yeah. Whereas over here in the UK, we tend to put the lesser known people in the middle.
Oh, you started
So
off with a name value person, and then you kind of give a little lull, and then back to more name value people.
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if you're a top name comedian, it's a great way to do it because it means you can open in one place, drive an hour up the road, and close.
Okay, that makes sense. So here in the
Yeah,
US, I mean, you're it's almost to where like your comedy stature is where you are in the how late you are in the show.
yeah,
Like, hey, if you're a lesser known person and you're like, hey, what's up? Can I get 5 minutes? I'll be like, yeah, you can get 5 minutes real quick up front. I'll put you up front and get rid of you.
yeah,
But in a lot of cases though, like if a person does want to do that, I'm sure the producer would accommodate that. Oh, I'll let you go first so you can leave and go do your other
yeah.
show. I'm sure that could be accommodated if requested. But like it wouldn't be something that we would just do just to do it.
So I'm just throwing out that point because because the way that traditionally here in the UK we do wrestling cards is slightly different. It's not quite the same. It's the way we traditionally book wrestling cards is very similar to how Vince Senior used to book,
Okay.
especially Madison Square Garden.
So you use Bruno Sammartino?
No, I
I'm
don't
just
think
kidding.
Bruno ever came over here.
I'm just kidding.
It's actually sort of random aside. You remember when they did the Billy Graham DVD? That never got released over here because we never had any access to Billy Graham. So I've got that
Oh
DVD, but
wow.
it's only like it's the American version. It's only because um, I, I found out how to unlock my DVD player so I could watch it. That's otherwise,
Superstar
yeah.
program doesn't exist in the UK.
Before 1988, we never had American wrestling on TV. We
98? Did you say 98?
88.
Oh, 88. Okay. Oh, that makes more
Yeah.
sense. 98.
I mean, I could go into all of that with Vince undercutting the Crabtrees by only asking for $400 a tape, where they were making like $3,000 a show. But and then Vince after opted to sign with Sky instead of sticking with ITV. But that. This is not the podcast for that. I mean, some would say this isn't the podcast to be talking about how to put together wrestling cards, but I feel this ties in with this section of the TNA story. But traditionally, the way we do wrestling cards here in the UK is we'll have an opener, which is like not necessarily, so it's not necessarily someone high on the card, but it's someone high energy. So you have pop the crowd, it'll get the crowd
So
into
like
it.
an X division or a cruiserweight match. Like a high
That's a good
flyer.
that's a good sort of match to have in that spot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good formula to have. Start off high flying.
And then we'll have a match. The next match will be sort of like a lesser match. It'll be one to bring the crowd back down. So they're sort of really into the show, and they can now just focus. They've got something now. They just bring the focus back, and then the third match is usually the match before the interval. So that will be traditionally it would be our main events. The same with the Madison Square Garden shows up to like the mid-90s.
Oh,
Although,
you mean is it before? Is it because it's the match before intermission?
yeah,
So is that the main event or is it a secondary main event?
no, that's the main event.
So that's where Hogan's gonna go.
Well, Hogan at the
Yeah, Hogan wasn't
MSG
around yet, I
house
guess.
at the MSG house shows, he always did that so he could get
Well,
out
the world
so he could get
champion, I
out
guess.
earlier.
That's where the world champion goes right before intermission.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, there's actually a very good reason for that, and that it's simply
Is it because people
capitalism.
leave?
No, what it is when people's blood temperature is higher, they're more likely to buy stuff. So
Oh, because
therefore,
they're jacked on adrenaline a little bit.
yeah. So you make money on concessions. I mean,
So
I
yeah,
think
that makes sense because they're excited, they're jazzed, but they can't really go anywhere because the show's still going to continue.
yeah,
So what do? You go out to the hallway, you buy sodas, you buy hot dogs, you buy shirts, or
yeah,
whatever they
exactly,
fucking sold.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think with the MSG early shows, they used to do that basically so Ray Stevens could escape MSG and live after crossing Fifth Avenue. But
Wow, was he a super heel?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who
I don't
faced
know much
Bruno
about
was
Ray
his.
Stevens, but I know he's from San Francisco. Like San
Yeah.
Francisco was like Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson, back in the territory days, pre WWF, I guess. But like that's pretty much all I know about him is that he was like the big player in the San Francisco scene.
Well, anyone who sort of faced off against Bruno or Pedro were,
Yeah,
you know,
you're right
were
about
big
that.
heels. So, I mean, I think later in the 80s, it was more just so Hogan can get away early. But,
So Hogan could go,
um,
yeah, exactly. So he doesn't
yeah.
stay till the end of the show.
So, yeah, then you'd have the intermission. And then the first match after intermission is just an easy watch because,
Yeah,
people are a bit slower,
people are filtering back in.
Yeah. It's something, you can just sort of, it's not going to be like a big angle. It's just going to be traditional match. Then the final
Yeah,
match is just big match. They'll send them home the way they'll send them home happy, and that is there you go. That's a 5 match card, which is traditionally how we did it.
okay, that
So
makes sense. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah,
you put Hogan. I know Hogan's not there. You put Hogan before intermission, and then you come back from intermission, and then you have an easy match, and then you put like Savage against Steamboat, and then they go home.
yeah.
That's cool. That's fun.
But yeah, so that's kind of I mean because the WWF they kind of did that with the Saturday Night Main Event shows.
Saturday's main event was completely a backwards book show because they
Yeah,
were expecting viewers to fall off during the show. And
yeah.
so they put the main event first and they worked their way backwards. Yeah, I do remember hearing about that formula.
But yeah, if you sort of look at the formula there is similar to how we book wrestling shows.
Okay.
And I don't know if like Tootsmont or whoever Vince Senior learned from spent time over here, but that there does seem to be comparisons between the MSG shows and the traditional UK shows.
Well, the
Um,
the the Saturday's main event shows, from what I understand, the reason why they worked backwards was because the show was so late that they did not expect their fans to stay for the whole show.
I mean, there's that to it. There's possibly also the fact that even the late 80s WWF roster could show up Hogan, and this was in front of their biggest audience. So they were like, we'll get him out of the way early. And the rest of the show will still look good.
That's
Um,
true, right? Hogan doesn't have to follow that.
yeah. But yeah, so that is. So getting back to Jerry Jarrett. So the point I'm trying to make is while Jarrett's methodology obviously has a track record of working, I'm just pointing out there are different ways of doing it. Not saying his way is wrong. I'm just saying there are other ways of doing it. Um,
Wait, you mean Jerry
Obviously,
Jarrett's not wrong? You're saying,
yeah.
or
I'm
Jeff?
just saying I'm saying his way of sort of building, from like the opening card to the main event
Yeah,
is not the wrong way of doing it. It's another
but
way of
also,
doing
I
it.
mean, one thing I want to point I want to make is that I feel like Jerry Jarrett's formula worked in the '80s and previously, but Jeff Jarrett was on TV throughout the '90s, and Jeff Jarrett kind of knew what the '90s audience was looking for as well.
This is true, yeah. But in the book, Jerry really goes into how he thinks Russo might have poisoned Jeff's mind, which
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's an argument for that. I think we can both agree.
I mean, right? We could do a whole episode about Jeff Jarrett and Vince Russo. Absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean,
so
I'm not going to say he's wrong. I'm not going to say that I agree with him, but I'm also not going to say he's wrong.
I mean, I think there is definitely merit to sort of both ideas. I think you he what he says is main event guys shouldn't be in prelim segments because it makes them seem like prelim guys. But in the same vein, like you said earlier, having the guys out there is sort of it's kind of like an extra hook to keep people to the end.
Yeah, because wrestling's changing, wrestling's evolving, and there's a lot more stories happening because it's television that weren't happening when Jerry Jarrett was booking. So I do agree with the Jeff Jarrett philosophy of having people come out earlier and building anticipation for a main event.
If it was on TV, yes, but also we're talking pay-per-view here, so people are paying to watch this. There's having so argue. You
Right.
could
So you
also
don't
argue.
necessarily need to keep you don't necessarily need to like keep them because they're gonna stay because they paid for it.
Yeah.
but you also want them to have this feeling of a build and anticipation. So when it comes time to pay for it again, they're willing to do it.
Yeah. So, like I said, you've got a lot of different
Yeah,
ideas. There's a
I
lot
feel
of
because
different
I
sides
feel
to
like
this.
Jerry Jarrett, if they went with Jerry Jarrett's format and it was boring, right, to the '90s audience, then they're not going to come back.
Yeah. Speaking of big stars and boring to the 90s audience, um, this so this is all kind of spread out over the timeline. I'm kind of condensing these four to just here because it it's here. They're all main event stars, so I'm putting them in the mid card to try and prove my point.
Okay.
So Savage, Warrior, Sting, and Scott Steiner are all people who negotiations have been in place with. Savage, less than 2 weeks after first meeting Andrew McManus, was like, "No, I'm not doing the WWA thing." Um, and in fact, in negotiations, said he would only do the TNA thing if McManus wasn't involved. Which
Savage
the
said
thing is,
that.
Savage did say that.
Wow. So he just didn't like the guy.
Something happened to sour that relationship quick, and I mean, McManus was still
He probably
they were
Randy
he was
probably
going to
thought
be,
he was related to Vince McManus.
but yeah, the idea was McManus was going to sort of help do like international tours if they got that far. So
Yeah.
technically, Savage wouldn't have had to deal with him. They also tried dealing with the Warrior, which
Good luck, especially then.
so at the time, yeah, so the way Jarrett tells it in his book is Warrior would agree with something over the phone. They get it put down in a contract. They'd send the contract to his people, and what they got back would be completely different to the contract they sent.
Wow.
Um, yeah, essentially, this is why the last Warrior has had one match this century, because he is a difficult person to get on with.
Did he have what was his one match this century?
So the Italian promotion NWE had him face their champion Orlando Jordan in 2006.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm sorry. So we all know that the Warrior made a lot of comments that were bigotry comments and back in the day, and I don't know how he really felt about people, but I think it's funny that he had to face a black gay man in his only match of this century.
Yeah, it's you watch some of the promos he did, and he you watch like the
I have to find
because
those
he
because
obviously he
I'm sure
won the
that's
match.
embarrassing and ridiculous.
Obviously, he won the match and then
Yeah,
vacated the
right.
title immediately. But the promo he did was like, "Oh yeah, this guy's brilliant. He's the future of the industry." This is Orlando Jordan in 2006.
Wow. And what year do we know what year Orlando Jordan was let go from WWE?
That would have been the year before, I
Oh
think. It's
05. That makes sense.
2005.
Wow, that's
So yeah,
crazy.
it wasn't that far removed from his WWE run.
Wow.
So yeah, I thought everyone knew he had had that one match because he was
No, I
training.
maybe I don't know. Maybe I blocked it out. I didn't. I don't think I knew about that.
No, he was because he was training with RVD for it.
Warrior was training with RVD.
Yeah,
Oh my
there's
gosh.
if you I don't know if the videos are still out there, but there's like videos of them at the gym, and RVD's got the face paint on, and Warrior's doing the thumbs.
Huh. Interesting. And this does not exist in my world. Are you
Okay,
sure you're not
maybe
making this up?
I am not making.
Okay.
I I have a box of wrestling magazines not far from where I'm sitting, and I'm sure if I was to look through them, I could find the two or three magazines that actually covered the build and the match. Um,
Wow. That's insane. Warrior Orlando Jordan, 2006 in Italy.
yeah, I think it was 2006. It was around that era, and
Yeah, that makes, I mean,
I
wow.
I remember the reviews at the time of it's something to the effect of, let's just say the Warrior got blown up in a match that featured a lot of rest holds, and
Wow.
the reviewer basically said something to the effect of, I think a lot of people in the crowd were wondering how a guy who looked that good was in such bad shape.
Oh wow. Did he look good? Wow.
Well,
My review would have been this is the worst performance I've seen since Jake the Snake in 2000.
um, so yeah, that, for anyone wondering what happened to the Warrior in the 2000s, between college talks, he, like Sam said, wrestled a gay black guy in Italy once.
Wow. And then Warrior was known to make these comments against, I don't know if they were racist comments, but I know they were homophobic comments. So yeah, that was, I'm sure that was awkward.
So yeah, those negotiations between him and the Jarretts got shut down pretty quickly after Warrior pulled the switching of the contracts a couple of times, and Jarrett basically writes in his book, "I can see why he spent so much time not employed by anyone."
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure a lot of the stuff that he added, that he changed, didn't make any sense.
But I don't think they didn't actually state exactly what the changes were, but
Yeah.
yeah, they were egregious enough that the Jarretts just went no. I mean, with Savage, he was. It seemed to
I
be
mean,
more paranoia with him. Like I said,
interesting.
he didn't want to be around McManus because apparently dealing with him for 2 weeks put him off ever dealing with him again.
He came
Um,
eventually.
he did come eventually, and we will get to that. Like I said in season two, which if we get to season two, which is going to be, I think that's going to be just sad to watch back. I don't think I've
I
seen
was
it
there when he came
since.
out. He walked down the stage and he was like, I see you guys. And then he left.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that match um, since it happened, and for a big part of the reason is because of the state Savage was in. It's just,
Oh
but
yeah,
like I
no,
said,
no, no.
we will
He
get
was,
to
I
that.
mean, we'll get into that match, like you said, in season two, whatever, but he only participated in half that match. If that. Yeah, he shouldn't have been wrestling at that point.
So yeah, so like I said, it seems to be a lot of with Savage. It's, Jarrett writes it that it was a lot of paranoia because he did seem like he was really up for the idea of doing this.
I mean, there's always
Um,
been paranoia with Savage, so I can see that. I mean, even the days
yeah.
in the WWF when he was married to Liz and he would lock her in the locker room or whatever, he was always like, looking over his shoulder and paranoid from what people say. So I could absolutely see that.
So yeah, Savage he wanted to have his lawyers go through it and then someone else go through it, and basically the contracts never came back, and it just got to the point of we can't do this.
He was like, I need the
Um,
Warrior to look at this.
I mean, I don't think it makes it onto the early press releases, but they almost did because they were doing um, an early photo shoot where they were going to have like Jarrett and Shamrock and Savage, and basically they couldn't get Savage. Savage didn't sign it in time, so he just didn't make the photo shoot. Um,
Oh,
and
interesting.
that is to the point, and that's about the point that it became very apparent that Savage wasn't going to be a. Sting is an interesting one. Sting was like, "Oh yeah, I'll do anything." Sting seems to be, from what I can gather, he's fairly positive when it comes to doing like the wrestling stuff. For someone who arguably got into the industry the wrong way, he does seem to have an appreciation for it. From what I hear, he loves doing all the fan stuff. And you look at him in AEW, he's doing that because yeah, he enjoys the fan
Oh, he
reaction.
doesn't need the money. He does not need the
Yeah.
money. So yeah, he's
Um,
there because he loves it. So Sting is an interesting case, like you just said. I think I could be wrong because I wasn't really on the inside of the stuff at this point, but I think Sting was signed exclusively to WWE at the time, and so that's why he didn't come into TNA until a little bit later when WWE folded. Is that correct?
right. What I can pick up from this is Sting was happy to come to TNA. However, his lawyers wanted whoever he signed with to take the Sting to sign for the Sting name for the entirety of his contract, and the Jarretts didn't have anything concrete at the time, so they couldn't sign that, which is why Sting didn't come over.
What does this consist of? Do they have to contact the singer Sting and ask him permission?
Interest. I have heard a rumor about that, and that is the rumor that the Sting that owns the Sting name is the wrestler.
Oh, interesting. So he has to contact Steve Borden.
Yes. That
Wow.
this is I don't know if this is true, but yeah, apparently when he started in the police, he didn't think to put a copyright to his name. So when Sting started
Oh, but he was Sting
several years later,
first, but Steve
yeah,
Borden copyrighted first.
yeah, that's what I have heard.
Interesting.
And so the other one I've got in this segment is Scott Steiner, who so Jarrett and
Wait. So what does it mean when you say that they had to sign the Sting name?
so they had to sign for the rights to use this Sting name, I believe is how it worked out.
Through from Steve Borden or from like the government?
No, that the lawyers basically wanted an assurance. Basically, just
So
wanted them to pay.
basically the TNA lawyers had to meet with the Steve Borden lawyers and just agree about rights on the name.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
okay.
because there wasn't any, because they didn't have a full structure in place, they were like, we can't guarantee anything at the minute. At the minute, we're just offering X amount of shows a year, so we
Right.
can't commit to.
They may not be financially worth our side if this thing
Yeah,
doesn't take off. Yeah, I can see that.
and that is essentially why Sting fell through. And the last name I have on this segment is Scott Steiner, who at the time really close friends with Jeff Jarrett. So Jerry was like, "Well, so we'll have Steiner down then." And it was one of those things of, they're happy being friends, but Steiner was like, "I don't know if I want to work for you."
Yeah, that's true. They didn't. And Steiner was also working for WWE.
Yeah.
And
In
I
fact,
think
actually,
there was contractual reasons. I don't know, I mean I could be wrong, but I think there was reasons why he couldn't join TNA legally until WWE folded as well.
well, actually, a few weeks before the first TNA pay per view, one of the lawyers turns around and said, the physical state that Steiner's in at the minute, we can't afford, if anything happens to him, one of our rings. That's the final reason that Steiner doesn't join TNA at this stage. However, he's just being funny about the whole thing up to that point. What do you think of those four names? Sort of the way that they kind of fell by the wayside. Do you think they would have made any impact on like the first pay per view?
I think they would have made I think they all would have made a tremendous impact on the first pay-per-view because they would have just changed the variables, in the equation. I don't think Warrior would have been good for anybody to work with. I feel like Savage's wheels were kind of falling off. I feel like maybe Savage should have considered going back to doing commentary at this time. But Sting, if they would have been able to get Sting off the bat, then maybe Shamrock wouldn't have been the first champion. Or if he was, maybe Sting would have had a bigger program or more of a spotlight. Also, if Scott Steiner was there, because he was doing some great work in WCW, for a while, and I feel like he would have really changed the dynamic of things, especially if Steiner and Sting were both there. It would have been just completely different.
Steiner's, I don't know. The Steiner in November 2001 actually he worked the wrestling industry by saying he was going to retire due to injury,
Oh,
and
he
then was
did. I didn't know this
he,
either.
yeah, it was in
Was it
like
work?
all it was work because a month later he was on the WWA shows,
Okay.
but it there was definitely for a while he was definitely like, oh yeah, no, this is definitely going to be it this time because he'd already done a retirement angle in WCW and he then just did the same thing just with the dirt sheets, which is just twisting the media. Speaking of media, it's around it's a around a month or so before the start of the pay-per-view that we're introduced to a lady by the name of Dixie Carter in this
Wow.
timeline.
So Dixie Carter was their PR person in the beginning.
Yeah, she's the all the if you track down the early like press releases in like the Observer or any other or any wrestling magazine, you've got the traditional sort of coming soon featuring like Jeff Jarrett and for some reason they're pushing a Grand Apollo quite hard and AJ Styles and
Malice was a big one.
yeah. But so they'd list off all the names, and like down the bottom, it would be like courtesy of Dixie Carter from whatever the PR company was called. So
Panda
yeah,
Energy PR. I don't know.
so yeah, they actually. So it was a choice between her and a PR firm that Jarrett was actually familiar with. But there was something about Dixie. Apparently, he saw a bit of teeny Jarrett in her. There was something about his
Yeah, he
grandmother.
liked her as a person.
Yeah, something about there was something. She reminded him of his grandmother, and he was like, "Whoa, I think she'll be right for this." And yeah, she definitely comes up in a few. We'll be talking about her and Panda in a few months' time. Obviously, Dixie becomes the president, but they play quite a role over the next few months, more than would
Over the next
become
decade,
apparent right
really.
now. Yeah, so from just being like the PR team to actually running the company.
Owning the company, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, as a fan, what is your thoughts on Dixie Carter?
So Dixie Carter, I mean, I have positive and negative about Dixie Carter. She was good. She came in when they needed her. She was able to provide to keep them afloat, to keep things going. She was passionate about it. She loved what she was doing. But when it came time, much later down the line, when she decided to become the Vince McMahon of TNA, and she was trying to be on TV a little bit, and she was kind of patting herself on the back on social media. I really didn't like that aspect of her, and I feel like she really brought the value of the company down by almost making herself the face of it. But essentially, overall, looking back on it, hindsight, I feel positive about Dixie Carter, and I was it was really sweet to see her a few months ago pop up backstage at Raw. She posted some pictures with her and a few people backstage at Raw, and I thought that was nice.
As a businesswoman, as a PR person, she actually had some really sort of high points. Uh, pro, in my previous life, I worked for a little show called Wrestle Talk TV, which is still around today on YouTube. And here in the UK, so Wrestle Talk aired on Challenge TV, which is essentially a TV show that replays old game shows. And we were the show immediately after Impact Wrestling. And the reason we stuck around for 7 seasons, at least to a degree, is because Dixie was forever selling the Wrestle Talk brand to the Challenge stuff.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. So she was
yeah,
very was it a business deal, or was it she just doing it because she wanted to help and promote the brand and she liked it?
well, we has a relationship with TNA. I think this is going to. I think it's probably come up slightly further down the line. Um, it's there's too much for me to go into now, but
That's
essentially,
okay. I would love to go
yeah,
into it sometime though. It sounds very,
the,
very interesting.
there was an anti WWE movement in the UK wrestling scene where basically
I mean, there was an
Impact,
anti WWE movement in the WWE in the American wrestling scene too for a while.
but Impact sort of kind of latched onto that and created this relationship which lasted into the Wrestle Talk TV days.
Wow,
Um,
wow.
and so, yeah, Dixie was always happy to work with us.
I
Um,
know that there was a time where TNA was kind of mediocre in the US, but it was like the main source of wrestling in the UK, and UK was like super behind it, and there was talks like a TNA, possibly moving there or whatever, this and that. But I do remember though that TNA at one point was like immensely popular in the UK, where on this side of the pond it was a little more just mediocre.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason behind that is most of the WWE's content was on. So you needed a Sky subscription, and then you needed a Sky Sports subscription to be able to watch
Is
most of
that
the
a
big
double
WWE
subscription?
shows. So you needed to have like a satellite.
So
So
you
you
need
needed
to
a
have a you
satellite.
need to sign up to satellite TV, but then you also need to sign up for a specific channel on satellite TV to get
Yeah,
WWF.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I can see
So
that.
yeah, I mean that's a big part of what Sky Sports. I mean, it's still massive, but it's literally off the back of Premier League football and WWE. Because obviously you had the football fans for the Premier League, and then all the wrestling fans signed up for the WWE stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing is, if you didn't have those two things, the most easily available wrestling in the early 2000s was Impact, which for whatever reason we showed over here on a Sunday evening.
Well,
Um,
and that's why Will Ospreay credits TNA for the wrestling he grew up watching, because that's what you guys watched in the UK.
yeah, I mean
Wow.
it was weird that it was shown on like Sunday nights, not Thursdays, because obviously TNA was all taped. But when they came over here and did a live show, they specially did it on. They actually did it live on Thursday, and it was like, hang on, can't you do that every week so we're not like constantly 3 days behind?
Yeah.
You know, we literally, because like I said, it's literally the rest of the channel was old game shows, so it was a case of, you know what, I'm sure people aren't going to miss repeats of the world's strongest man. Just give us our wrestling at a more appropriate time.
Yeah, they're not gonna miss Big Brother UK.
Yeah, because like the pay per views would then show on like the Tuesday afterwards, I think, which was oh
As a first
well,
run.
yeah. So the first run of like
Wow.
the TNA pay per view, because yeah, we didn't have to pay for the TNA pay per views; they just showed on the channel.
Are you talking about the weekly
No,
early
no, I'm
ones?
talking like
Like the
the
actual
the,
pay-per-views.
the monthly pay per views. Yeah.
Okay.
So this would
Wow.
be from about 2009 to 2015. So
Wow.
this is the period I'm talking about. But that's also it's also the period that TNA was really hot. But
Yeah.
no,
Right.
regardless, even with that, regardless of what people say, they were never moving over here
I'm gonna
because
argue a little bit. I'm gonna say TNA was most hot like '05 to like 2010. I think TNA lost a lot of steam when Hogan came in, even though a lot of Hogan brought in a lot of big names. I feel like
yeah,
he really changed what TNA's mission statement was, and that turned off a lot of fans.
yes, but with I'm talking about the broadcast. It was broadcast at that time slot from 2009 to 2015. So
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
it wasn't on as strong a channel prior to that. In fact, I don't think I think it was quite late into the weekly pay per views before it even got onto an obscure satellite channel we had over here, which was literally called the Wrestling Channel. Yeah, it was literally TNA and documentaries and just independent wrestling shows just would send their stuff to this channel.
That's
Um,
cool.
it
I mean, for a lot of these independent wrestling companies, it's exposure.
yeah, I mean, it did sort of. There's a reason that our wrestling boom, although with the Death of the Attitude Era, you didn't see it in the mainstream. Indie wrestling in the UK was still going strong in the mid 2000s because, at least in part, they still had a TV outlet.
That's cool.
So, like I said, that the Dixie Carter stuff that was happening in May of that year. The start of May 2002 saw the last ever WWF pay per view. It was Insurrection here in the UK.
What
Uh,
was the real last pay per view?
That would have been
One that I could
Backlash.
watch. Was it
The
No
lot, the
Way Out?
lot, no, Backlash.
Oh,
That
Backlash.
would
Okay, that makes
that would
sense.
have been when Hogan won the title.
Yeah.
So, which means that the WWF ended with Hulk Hogan as champion, which kind of is quite fitting when you think
Full
about it.
circle. Yeah. Wow. Get the F
But
out.
he didn't make it over here for the Insurrection pay per view though,
I
because
mean, why would he?
yeah.
Just
So
kidding.
so instead of getting Hogan versus the Undertaker, we got Undertaker versus Triple H, which
Oh yeah, well, we got Undertaker versus Undertaker once.
no, to be honest, the Undertaker Triple H matches in 2002 were all awful.
Yeah, well,
I think this one might have been slightly better than the one they had at King of the Ring, but that's dishing out faint praise at best.
Undertaker. I mean, we're getting off the topic here, but Undertaker didn't start having good matches until well into the early 2000s. He was only really playing off of his character, and he didn't really like incorporate work rate into his stuff until he started doing the WrestleMania winning streak and all that jazz.
I mean, he did still have some good matches. There was, I
Yeah, but I
believe,
mean, Jake the Snake at WrestleMania 8, yeah, that's not really like that's just he just
yeah.
chokeslams him and pins him really. He tombstones him on the cement, whatever. But like he didn't start having like he jumped over the top rope to the outside until like, 05, 06, 07.
I mean, he did the leap over the ropes sometimes. He did it at WrestleMania 14. Kane moved, put him through the table.
Yeah, you're right. He did do that.
This period, he has the ladder match with Jeff Hardy around this time. That's still pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But no, I do get what you mean. His matches were not great. Again, I'm going to hark back to my old podcast, the Wrestling 20 Years Ago podcast. Our boss, he did there is just this one of his rants when we covered Fully Loaded 2000 of the berry job he does on Kurt Angle at that event is just you need to listen to it to experience it. It's just so much vitriol and venom, and you listen to it, it's like, yeah, no, that is all deserved. Just thought he does that match. So yeah, this Insurrection pay-per-view is notable for being the last WWF pay-per-view. It's also the first ever single branded event. Granted, the brand split's only been around about 6 weeks, but
Interesting.
yeah, so it's a Raw pay-per-view, except they have Triple H on it because who's a SmackDown guy. So, but then 6 months later, they did a SmackDown pay-per-view called Rebellion, which had Booker T on it, who was a Raw guy. So it balances out.
Yeah.
Uh,
You know that Triple H is worth Booker T and the Dudley Boys?
yeah, I remember that storyline, and it's just one
That's
of
the
those things.
value of Triple H, Booker T and the Dudley Boys.
It's like one of your most decorated world champions and most decorated tag team champions are equal to the son-in-law, and it's like, yeah, no, that tracks. That tracks totally. So I'm bringing up this pay-per-view really just for trivia, because it's actually the events that happen afterwards that are what everyone remembers, and that is, of course, the plane ride from hell.
Ooh.
I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to go too much into this. I mean, there are some documentaries out there. Dark Side of the Ring did it a couple of years ago. I don't think I I've read the report, and I don't know if I've actually seen that episode, but most of
Of
what I've
Dark Side of the
heard is
Ring?
like Dark Side of the Ring. Yeah,
It's pretty good. I mean, it's okay. It's Tommy Dreamer, it made Tommy Dreamer look really bad because
yeah.
they were doing the whole thing about Ric Flair and the flight attendant where he was helicoptering his thing, and that's sexual assault kind of. And
It is,
Tommy
yeah.
Dreamer's other going laughing up, going, oh, Rick's just being Rick. And Tommy Dreamer got a lot of heat when that episode first came out.
Yeah, it's weird people like sort of acted that way, and it's a case of I remember reading all that stuff in the reports, and there was not that violent a response to it then. But again,
Right.
it's different
But
times.
there was no repercussion or backlash publicly at the time, but then like what 15 years later when the Dark Side of the Ring came out, then Ric Flair gets canceled for like a week and a half.
Yeah. Although there was three different separate lawsuits that came out from that plane ride from hell. But again, we're
Yeah.
not. Again, I'm trying not to focus too much on this because, like I said, there are good documentaries out there. It's all covered. We're focusing more on like the TNA stuff, and that is the plane ride from hell results in the termination of the contracts of Scott Hall and Kurt Hennig due to the stipulation under which the contracts were terminated. Hennig had a no compete clause which
Oh, but
ran.
Scott didn't.
Scott didn't because I'll go into this in a sec. But Scott's contract had a clause where he was prohibited from having alcohol, otherwise they could release him.
He had like a
No
bad
questions asked.
behavior clause,
Yeah, and
essentially.
I don't know if it's the pay-per-view or if it's one of the shows on that tour, but he's cornerman for X-Pac and apparently falls asleep at ringside, which was enough proof for them. And then just all the stuff from the plane ride from hell, and they were just he does work
They
a
were
match on.
so they were pouring beer on him too in the build to WrestleMania, which was not nice at all.
Yeah,
But anyway,
but yeah, so he does work a match on Raw the next night, and that's pretty much it. They're convinced that him falling asleep at ringside is a sign that he was drinking on the tour, and then the all the stuff that happened on the plane ride from hell, they're just like, no, that's it, you're done. See, I love Scott Hall. He's got to be in my, if I was to put like my five favorite wrestlers of all time, him and like Bret Hart would definitely be two of the ones in there without me having to think about it. But this is not a great
I
time
love
for
Scott
him.
Hall. I do.
This is definitely not a great time for Scott Hall. I don't know if you
No.
remember, but in WCW towards the end, there was a rivalry between Goldberg and Nash, where Hall's contract is on the line, and literally his contract, he gets released from his contract as soon as Goldberg wins the match that terminates Hall's contract.
Wow. And then he went
Uh,
to New Japan or something. He went to Japan.
Eventually, yeah, but but I think it speaks volumes about the state Scott Hall was in the late 2000s, that he didn't
Yeah.
just turn up on Raw as soon as any no compete was over. Because can you just imagine that? You've got like a match between, like, say, Crash Holly and Perry Saturn, and then just through the crowd, you got Scott Hall
Oh
walks
my
out.
gosh. What if Scott Hall comes out on Raw the same way he came out on
Yeah,
Nitro?
exactly,
Like,
right?
you know who I am, but you don't know why I'm here. And like he did this whole like almost the same promo. And that would have been
Yeah,
so cool. That would have been, oh my gosh.
but I think it says volumes that
They didn't
didn't
snatch him up.
happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the only reason that they probably didn't do that is because of the state he was in. 'Cause you said
Yeah.
about the New Japan stuff. The New Japan stuff was almost a year later.
Okay, okay. What year did he get released from WCW? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, like I said, so that would be like mid to late 2000s.
Okay.
So he was actually not under contract the whole time the invasion was going on, and they
He
weren't
could have
prepared to
led
bring.
that invasion with the coming out of the crowd.
Yeah,
He could have done the entire thing that he did, and then he'd be like, "I'm gonna have a friend here next week," and then next week he brings in Mike Awesome. Like they could have done the whole thing like an invasion, like an NWO style invasion, a hostile takeover. Oh, that would have been great. But
I know,
yeah, you're
right?
right. He was in no condition.
Because who is it he put over? It was like, I don't think it was a Carter, but it's someone who became the same sort of level as a Carter is now in New Japan. And I remember watching that match, and there's nothing wrong with the match, but he is miserable. You can see it in his
Probably
face. He's
like Chono or something, I would imagine, just by guessing. I mean,
no, no. This was at the. I'm vamp for 2 seconds. I am going to quickly look this up.
okay.
Uh,
But yeah, um, I think with him jumping the rail on Raw and doing a hostile takeover style storyline with WCW Invasion, I think that would have been really incredible. I'm gonna when we're done here, I'm gonna ponder that for a minute and ponder what that would have looked like. Like they could have saved DDP, They could have done the whole. They could have got rid of the whole stupid stalker angle. Scott Hall could have come out on Raw. He could have said next week, I got a big surprise for you, right? And then everybody's like, oh my God, what's gonna happen next week? And the next week he comes into to Jim Ross, and Jim Ross is like, what's gonna happen? What do you have? And then he's like, turn around, and then DDP just diamond cutter, boom, and Jim Ross is down. Like that would have been so cool. Like, oh, they should have done that. They robbed us. I
Yeah.
never thought of a hostile takeover WCW style invasion.
Tanahashi, that's who.
Okay, that makes sense. Tanahashi.
Yeah.
Tanahashi? Wait,
Yeah.
the current president of New Japan Pro Wrestling? The same guy?
Hiroshi Tanahashi.
Wow. So I don't know if you know how well you follow New Japan currently, but towards the I think the beginning of this year or the end of last year, he got appointed president of New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Okay. I think I was aware that they changed ownership. I didn't know who'd taken it over. But yeah,
wow. Okay.
he
must have been young because he's still wrestling, and that was over 20 years
yeah,
ago.
he was literally he was only about a year or two into his career at this point, and basically Hall had sort of seen him at the dojo and was like, oh, that kid's got something. And so yeah, they had him go over Hall in the build up to Hall facing Muta.
I would like to hear at some point Tanahashi give his insights on Scott Hall.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, it was because Tanahashi at the time was just some young kid, so it was
a young boy.
I think,
yeah, absolutely.
So it's literally on YouTube as something like Scott Hall faces a young Japanese guy, something to that effect.
Like, didn't even know his name.
Yeah, and it's basically he only gets the win because Muta sort of distracts Hall, but it's one of those things of. But it's just weird to think now.
Give me the ending. I'm just kidding.
But it's one of those things. But obviously, he's become such a big name since it's weird.
Okay, I found it. It's 6.5 minutes. September 2001. Scott Hall versus Japanese Young Boy. September 9th, 2001. Holy crap. This is 2 days before 9/11. Actually, it's Japan time, so it's like a day and a half before 9/11.
Yeah. I did not think about it that way until you just said that.
And this is like less than like 24 hours before 9/11, maybe 30 hours, something like that. That's crazy.
Weirdly, 9/11 is going to come up a couple of times in this episode.
All right.
That is
I watched
not where
many 9/11 documentaries. I'm ready for it.
But yeah, so yeah, other than the New Japan stuff, Scott Hall didn't really do anything between. So this New Japan stuff, that's 9 months after he gets released from WCW.
Yeah, 2001. Okay, I can see that. Yeah, and September of 2001. So this is even after WCW's folded.
Yeah, so that was like the middle of that's towards the end of his run.
Okay, that makes sense. You're right.
Yeah. Because I think because the final match he has is with Muta, and that was the end of September.
I just want to say, if you're keeping track of the timeline at home, Scott Hall versus Tanahashi was after WCW folded, but before the Bash of the Beach 2000 trial ended.
Well, I mean, technically, WCW became the Universal Wrestling.
They became UWF, correct? Because that's what they were originally. That's what was purchased. The Universal Wrestling Federation. I just learned.
The Universal Wrestling the Universal Wrestling Federation is what Turner kept to deal with all the legal stuff, and that didn't fold till 2017.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. I gotta look into this. I gotta figure out what the UWF was doing between 2002 and 2017.
It was mostly lawsuits.
Wow.
It was so like
they just basically because they bought what Turner bought was the UWF and they rebranded it to World Championship Wrestling. But when they sold World Championship Wrestling off, they just kept all the legal issues.
Yeah, well, Vince wasn't going to buy all that, was he? Think about it. So, like you had like the Bash at the Beach thing you just mentioned, and
You
there
also
was
had
like
Sonny Ono. I don't know if how far this drug out, but I know Sonny Ono was trying to sue the company for being racist or something along those lines.
but yeah, there was like but all the lawsuits literally they folded it the day after the last lawsuit was settled.
So that it
But
took
that was
15. It took over 15 years for all these lawsuits to get settled.
yeah.
Wow.
Well,
But yeah, I just learned because I was listening to Bash at the Beach 2000 documentary podcast, and they were talking about how it was UWF that was in court for that. Yeah, that's crazy.
well, I mean, think about it. The when Hall and Nash showed up in 1996, the WWF filed a lawsuit, and for years Hall was like, "Oh, I'm safe. They're not going to fire me while that lawsuit's still going." And that's literally how long Hall stayed employed. The moment that lawsuit ended, he was pretty much done.
Wow. You know what's funny about that is I know it's all like whatever, 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 but like a lot of the Razor Ramon mannerisms were WCW Diamond Stud did them first on WCW television.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of clips like the Diamond Stud, and you sort of look at it and go, "Yeah, that's pretty much Razor
That's pretty much Razor Ramon
without the
with a different
branding."
name. Without the WWF machine behind him, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so like I said, Hall because of the alcohol clause, there was no no compete clause because that was the way the contract worked, and so yeah, that's why Hall's on the first pay per view and heading to the chart for a while later. Also, around this time, TNA get their first proper investor sort of down on paper. It's a guy by the name of Richard Scrunchy. Again, I'm only saying this now because he is going to come up probably in the next couple of months.
Is
He
he an heir
was
of a hair accessory company?
surprisingly no.
Okay.
I can see what you're thinking, but no. Um, he's CEO of a group called Health South. There are some people who know what that name is, so they'll know why this is going to come up. But yeah, um, basically, the way it worked was that he was so Jarrett knew him through a contact, and Jeff went to pitch in this, and basically he said, "Hey Jeff, what have you actually got invested in?" Jeff was like, "Everything but the house and my retirement," and that impressed him enough that he was prepared to give them $3 million credit.
Yes, you
Um,
know what? I heard Jeff tell a story on his podcast that yeah, that because Jeff Jarrett went all in on it, he decided to go in on it as well.
yeah, so they came to an agreement with regards to equity and ownership. It took a bit of back and forth, but eventually they got to something they could both agree on, and so that is where a lot of TNA's well, at least where their credit came from at in the early days,
In the beginning,
and
yeah.
that kind of bites them in the ass quite soon. Like I say, in about 2 months we'll be going into that. Because again, this is where it also ties in with Dixie Carter and Panda Energy. So,
And Hausman
I mean,
too, I think.
no, Houseman's actually a month before this.
Okay,
Before
okay.
that,
You're
because
right, because he's after the first episode.
yeah, it's about episode 3 or 4. We'll be getting into Houseman. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, I've also got noted here that Chikara debuts on the 25th of May. Um, not a promotion I'm familiar with. I think I've seen some of their matches, and some of it is a bit.
I'm somewhat familiar with them. I mean, not
Yeah,
I've never watched an entire show, but I've seen some stuff here and there, and I follow them online a little bit.
yeah, I think I don't know. They just maybe at the time when they started, I would have been more into them because I liked a lot more indie stuff when I was younger. But I've kind of grown away from that,
I was a
and the
big
stuff.
fan of the ants. Do you remember the ants? The colony, fire ant and worker ant and soldier ant.
I'm aware of them because one of
I
them
thought
was
that was
Orange
pretty fun
Cassidy.
and cute. They were the first like funny wrestling that I really like saw in my life. They're the first like we're not going to take wrestling seriously. We're just going to do play by our own rules kind of thing in wrestling, I think.
Trouble with funny wrestling is, I mean, doing it as like its own universe works, or do it as one segment on a show, you can't. But when they used to bring in like serious wrestlers and make them do the comedy stuff, it just, yeah, it wasn't for me.
Yeah, like
Uh,
I remember towards the end of Chikara, they brought in X-Pac and made him the 1 2 3 kid, and he was like older, so it's like, oh, that's cute, whatever, I guess.
yeah,
But yeah, I think the way they did it worked because it was their whole universe was like almost like we make up our own rules, we do things the way that we want to do it. It was non-traditional wrestling, and so I feel like it worked for them.
mm. No, I've nothing is like I said, I've not had a lot to do. I'm not seeing a lot of their stuff,
Yeah,
but I
the King of
feel,
Trios was pretty prestigious for a while.
oh, I have I have a story about that. Which but again, that doesn't need to be told on air. I can tell you that one off air if you need
Okay.
to hear it. But yeah, so also 3 days after that, 28th of May, Dan Severn is stripped of the NWA title.
I don't understand why. I don't understand why they didn't want to use Dan Severn. Jeff Jarrett talked about it, but I feel like he kind of danced around it. He never really gave a definite answer. Was it because they thought he was boring? Why didn't they want to use Dan Severn?
There's, we'll circle back to this because this brings the NWA title in, and it's
Right.
the NWA title at this point has kind of been out in the weeds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to last time the NWA title was seen on TV would be 1998 WWF, and
And he was the
it,
champion.
he was the champion then as well. Yeah, no, it actually had quite an adventure. Well, I say between then and now, most of that it was in the last year. But I'm going to quickly blitz through the NWA title history, and we'll get back to the Severn stuff. Escaping the Asylum, a look at the history of NWA TNA, has been a Smart Alex production. It's been presented by Elliot James and Funky Sam McGill, and it's been edited and produced by Adam.